demands of learners and the changing nature of the economy, and we must evangelise to the rest. Instead of telling potential students they must study in a particular way, at a particular time, and in a particular place, we should be opening up provision and valuing different forms of lifelong learning. And instead of strangling further education with ever more red tape, we should dismantle the bureaucracy and trust colleges to manage their own affairs. With all the immense human capital, free, independent, self-regulated. And we should trust learners to make their own decisions about what to study, supported by a dedicated and professional all-age careers and guidance service. In respect of universities, we must understand that if university expansion is to continue, building on the best, as I've said, we must address the issue of access. I will not be content, as I've indicated, until we build a more mobile, cohesive, and just nation. I will not be content, to paraphrase F.E. Smith, until all with stout hearts and sharp minds have their chance of glittering prizes. Thank you very much.
Have you got time for a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Two very quick questions from the floor, and then John really does have to go back. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask from the floor? Yes, ma'am. It's okay. Gillian will shout. Yeah, it's fine.
John, I applaud the idea of open access and lifelong learning. What I don't hear in what you just said is what does this do for research? Once you've got people into the system, how do you keep them there?
That's a very good point. Let me say this. I know that there is a lively debate about research funding, about the fact that the vast majority of research funding goes to a very small number of HE institutions. It's actually extraordinarily small if you look at the figures. I mean, actually 20, you might say, really only 12 at the absolute apex in terms of volume. But I also know that in the new universities in particular, there is an immense amount of good work done in terms of applied research. I was at the University of Derby recently talking about that, and subsequently met the Vice-Chancellor of that institution in London, and was pleased and flattered when he reminded me that I'd been a student when he was a lecturer at Nottingham University. It made me feel immensely young. So I don't underestimate the work that some of the institutions that perhaps don't get as much publicity as they should are doing in terms of applied research. I think we need to look closely at how we fund research. I think we need to look closely at how we can build on the kind of good work I've described in the university sector. And what I certainly wouldn't want to see is two categories of universities, those who research and those who don't. It seems to me to be fundamental to the very definition of a university that it teaches, but it also researches, and that research informs teaching. That's the point, isn't it? That's good for teachers and it's good for learners. And the regime that I would put in place would reflect that. Given the time, I can't expand further, but I'd be delighted to take that further with you as a follow-up to this meeting.
Thank you. Nick Mitchell at the back. I think we're really going to have to curtail this, actually.
I'll take three.
You take three? Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Nick Mitchell.
John, my name is Nick Mitchell, Chairman of the Training Foundation.
Yeah.
I was interested to hear your comments, which is obviously focused more towards HE and FE than some of the audience here today, which are in the commercial training sector. And we're in discussion at the moment with one of the oldest universities about a bridging program where we're working with an HE institution to create a foundation degree leading to a full degree, targeted at people working in the workplace who don't have a primary degree, a first degree. What's your view of the development, the opportunities for growth in that, what I think is a very, very important potential area for getting more highly qualified people in senior posts in industry?
Well, thank you for that question. The reason that much of what I said is relevant to much of this audience is because it's about a revolution in terms of the way that we train and educate people. I'm calling for a very fundamental rethink about access to both training and education. Both where people study and how they study seems to me to be central to that. Your specific point leads me to the point that I didn't make in my speech, but which I have made previously, and that is that you need different pathways into training and study. The problem with higher education, certainly in this country, has been there has been a very well-established academic route into higher study, but a very poorly developed vocational route. If you think about the way that probably most of us have progressed, it's through, in my case, A-levels, now GCSEs, A-levels, degree, subsequent qualifications. But the vocational route into higher study is altogether more confused, isn't it? There's a panoply of different qualifications. There isn't a clear pathway. Schools often don't provide adequately effective advice. Parents are not confident about the vocational route. So we need to have a system which right from the outset provides a clear vocational pathway. And I rather hope that diplomas might do that. Certainly in principle they should. Suddenly, for two reasons, they may not, perhaps three. The first is that they've been academicized. We're so insecure about the value of practical learning, we feel that in order to make it respectable, we have to make it academic. What I say to people is that, that I had myself been clever enough to be practical. Sadly, I wasn't clever enough to be practical, so I had to be academic. And I think we need to revalue culturally vocational learning. We need to elevate the practical. The second thing that I conclude is that we need more entry points of the kind you're describing. People coming to the workplace into different kinds and patterns of study. More stopping off points, more getting on points, as it were. And that's why I spoke in my earlier remarks about mature learners, for example. It's why I talked about reinvesting in the apprenticeship system. Apprenticeships aren't just about young people. And one of the proposals we made is to equalise the funding between so-called mature apprenticeship and standard apprenticeships. And the third point, I think, is that once people get onto that ladder, there has to be a clear progression route. And I want, for example, the apprenticeship to be a standard route into university learning. And we're talking about providing additional financial support to people who start by the kind of study you're describing, move into perhaps an apprenticeship, and then want to take that further beyond level 4 and beyond into higher education through foundation degrees, through full degrees, and so on. So I, in my more flexible, responsive model, would want to very much take on board the sort of practice you're describing. It's central to my ambitions, because I just think we have to recognise that as prosperous a country, we need more people with more advanced skills. That changes their lives, because it changes their life chances, but it also changes the shape and character of our society and the effectiveness of our economy in competing with countries that have leapfrogged us in these terms.